Edward VI, born on October 12, 1537, was the only legitimate son of King Henry VIII and his third wife, Jane Seymour. His birth was highly anticipated, as Henry VIII had long sought a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Edward's reign, though brief, was marked by significant religious and political changes that set the stage for future developments in England. Edward was born at Hampton Court Palace and was the focus of immense joy and celebration throughout the kingdom. Tragically, his mother, Jane Seymour, died of postnatal complications just 12 days after his birth. Despite this loss, Edward was cared for by a team of devoted attendants and received an exceptional education. He was tutored by some of the finest scholars of the time, including Richard Cox and John Check, who instilled in him a strong grounding in Protestantism, languages, and classical literature. He had two half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth. He grew up surrounded by care and attention. Henry VIII reportedly had Edward's room cleaned every day. Everyone had high hopes for their future king. Edward's birth was a pivotal moment in English history. Henry VIII had desperately sought a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Edward's arrival seemed to guarantee the Tudor line for generations to come. Little did they know what twists and turns fate had in store. Edward was a bright and curious child. He received a top-notch education. Renowned scholars taught him languages, history, and theology. Edward excelled in his studies, showing a keen intellect and a thirst for knowledge. He particularly enjoyed religious studies, influenced by the Protestant Reformation sweeping Europe. People described Edward as a serious and devout boy. He was said to be kind and compassionate. Even at a young age, he showed signs of wanting to shape the Church of England. Edward's upbringing had a profound impact on him. This would greatly influence his short reign as king. Edward became King of England on January 28, 1547, at the age of 9, following the death of his father, Henry VIII. Given his youth, the kingdom was governed by a regency council, initially led by his uncle Edward Seymour, the Duke of Somerset, who served as Lord Protector. Somerset pursued a policy of religious reform, furthering the Protestant Reformation initiated by Henry VIII. Despite his young age, Edward took his role seriously. He was crowned at Westminster Abbey. The young king closely followed political affairs and attended council meetings. He showed a keen interest in matters of state and religion. Edward's reign marked a period of significant religious reform in England. Edward VI's reign saw a wave of religious changes. New prayer books were introduced, replacing Latin with English in church services. This allowed people to understand worship in their own language. Religious reforms. Edward VI's reign is most notable for the significant advances in Protestantism in England. The Book of Common Prayer, written in English and introduced in 1549, was a cornerstone of these reforms. The Act of Uniformity made its use mandatory in all churches, and the Church of England's doctrine became increasingly aligned with Protestant teachings. Edward, a devout Protestant, supported these changes, which moved England further away from Catholicism. These reforms aimed to simplify and purify religious practice. Edward's religious changes were not without controversy. Many people, particularly in rural areas, remained attached to traditional Catholic practices. This led to unrest and rebellion, such as the Prayer Book Rebellion in 1549. Despite the challenges, Edward's reign solidified the Protestant Reformation in England. Edward's reign was also marked by political struggles within the Regency Council. Somerset's authority waned due to military failures abroad and economic difficulties at home. He was eventually overthrown by John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, who became the dominant power in Edward's government. Northumberland continued the Protestant reforms and strengthened the central government, though his rule was marred by social unrest and financial challenges. Health and death, Edward VI was never a robust child, and his health began to decline rapidly in early 1553. He suffered from a severe respiratory illness, likely tuberculosis, which worsened over time. Realizing that his death was imminent, Edward, under the influence of Northumberland, sought to prevent the succession of his half-sister Mary, a devout Catholic, by naming his Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as his heir. Although Edward VI's reign, though short, had many challenges, he faced challenges both domestically and internationally. Religious unrest continued in some parts of the country. England also faced threats from abroad, particularly from France. Tragically, Edward's health began to deteriorate in his early teens. He developed a persistent cough and fever. Despite the best efforts of physicians, his condition worsened. It is believed he suffered from tuberculosis. Edward's illness cast a shadow over his reign. Edward VI died on July 6, 1553, at the age of 15 at Greenwich Palace. His death led to a brief succession crisis, as Lady Jane Grey was proclaimed queen but was quickly deposed by Mary I, who restored Catholicism in England. However, Mary, Edward's elder half-sister and a devout Catholic, ultimately claimed the throne. England's religious and political landscape would be forever altered by the short but significant reign of Edward VI.